Hello, everybody, and welcome. This is the building series. Recruiting is a one-night stand. We have to thank Frank Thompson, who was one of our panelists. He mentioned this topic in the session, and at that time, we were really talking about, your role as a recruiter. So we'll give him a chance to explain some of that. I am Veretta Yancey, and I founded the company called HR for All People. And basically, we're a collaborative of HR professionals, a community who shares resources with each other. So during this time, it's really great to have a network, as you know, and we invite you to be a part of ours. So thanks again for joining us. This session is about you. We're going to be checking in the chat and making sure that we can answer any questions that you have. And since we only have an hour, let's get started. So first, let me just read some of the general housekeeping items here. I want to make sure because we have a kind of what we call a disclaimer. So this session is going to be recorded and it's available for you to share. So please feel free to share it on your social media. Also, we'll be on the lookout again for comments or questions in the chat. This is about you, so we want to hear what you have to say. Plan to join us for our next panel session. Next week, it's going to be with SHRM, the Black Chapter Presidents. And so that'll be a great time to learn more about how you can develop personally as well as professionally by becoming involved with your local SHRM chapter. As always, the information provided during this session should not be considered legal advice. We encourage you to consult legal counsel as it pertains to your unique situation. So I'm excited to have our panelists to join us today, and you'll be encouraged by their strong expertise and really their knowledge in this space. So first, Janice Presley, you may have seen her before in our, Janice and I met through HR Facebook group, and we kind of partnered right away. It's always good to have somebody like Janice in your corner. She's well connected and has access to a lot of resources. Welcome, Janice.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Thanks. Fred Thompson's next. And Fred is a recruiting consultant with Outreach Staffing, and he also has his own placement agency. And again, he's the one who came up with this racy title, so we'll hear back from him. Welcome, Fred.
Glad to be here.
Thank you. And Toya White. Toya is one of my favorite recruiters. We met during our days at Hewitt, and this was a long time ago. This is 2007. She's in Chicagoland with Fred, and you guys welcome Toya.
Hello, thank you. Hi, everyone.
Thanks. So look, before we get, you guys, you may be familiar with the format. I always like for them to share a little bit about themselves and then give us a story, a favorite story, funny story, either something about yourself, something about a candidate, to just kind of start us off. So Janice, how about you go first?
Okay. So hi, I'm Janice Presley. I'm originally from the Atlanta, Georgia area and have been living in Southern California for the last 4 years. My career has taken me all over every place. I'm not responsible for talent acquisition at this particular time, but I will tell you 99% of my career, I've done a lot with talent acquisition. So I'm definitely excited to be here. Probably the funniest story is that for a long time, I used to work for a nonprofit organization called Inroads, and I was the managing director and responsible for bringing students of color from high school and college into corporate America. And a lot of that they used to call the School of Hard Knocks because they thought that I was really hard on them, but it was really about preparation. So one of my funny recruiting stories is I had a candidate who I have been doing prep, meetings with, basically he came to his final interview with me before he was going to meet with the client. And when he came to the interview with me, he had his hair in cornrows. So this is like years ago, where cornrows were not acceptable in the workplace. And so fast forward, I tell him, I said, hey, you got to interview. This bank is really conservative. You need to cut your hair. And he's like, oh, yeah, I'm going to cut my hair. It'll be fine. I'm like, okay, great. So he goes to the interview. I get a phone call from the manager. The manager calls and was like, hey, the candidate was great. We loved him, but we're not going to make him an offer. And I said, why not? What happened? And he said, well, you know, his look. And I said, he didn't cut his hair. And she said, absolutely. So I called the candidate and I said, hey, you know what happened? We had this conversation. And he said to me, if I get the job, then I'll cut my hair. And my response to him is, you're not going to get the job because you did not cut your hair. And I said, you know, I know what I'm doing, et cetera, et cetera. He had an attitude and he left. A year later, guess what? He cut his hair and he got the job. So needless to say is that as a recruiter, one of the things I've always really tried to do is to set my candidates up for success. And so if a recruiter is giving you information and insight, of course you are grown and you can decide what you are, what you're not going to do, but they're giving you the information for a reason. So again, it was kind of a sad story that turned, you know, happy a year later, but I think he learned a lesson, you know, and I used to always say to them, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. So every day you just can't show up, you know, doing what you want to do because, and we're going to talk about this a little bit later, I hope, you want to make sure that people can see you in the role. And the problem was they could not see him in the role as a student, you know, coming in out of college because of the cornrows. And so you want to, you know, take away some of the things that might be considered, you know, you being a rebel or non-conforming or whatever, especially if you decide that corporate America is the thing for you.
Right. And so even though they have those crown laws, and, you know, I know in California, and I just saw another state that just passed it, it's still one of those things that people have to see you in the role. And what I usually tell candidates is to look at their leadership team and see. I remember working for a company and there was no facial hair on men. And so you just knew that if I'm trying to, you know, become a certain, you know, place, you know, within the company, traditionally they don't have people with facial hair. So, or, you know, men with facial hair. So, okay, Toya, we go next.
Hi, my name is Toya Butler-White. I've been in talent acquisition for about 15 to 20 years. I've worked in banking, financial services, consulting, manufacturing, and telecommunications. I really love what I do. The crux of my background is in information technology. And so that's where most of my experience lies. I have managed teams. I've worked as an individual contributor, and I just really like what I do. In terms of a funny story that I can share, it's a story that actually is evolving as we speak. I'm not going to mention the name of the company, but I will say that there was a candidate who actually went through an interview process, and apparently he had 8 interviews and had to even prepare a presentation. And this was for a senior talent acquisition manager position. He ended up not getting the opportunity. The recruiter left him a message on his voicemail and gave him the feedback that they said that he didn't have the depth that was needed for the position, nor were they looking to hire a diverse candidate. The candidate did happen to be African American. And so when he called the recruiter back, he spoke to the recruiter live and wanted to get more clarity around, what do you mean in terms of me not having the depth of experience and you're not looking to hire a diverse candidate? And the recruiter hung up on him. As a result, he put this information out on LinkedIn. He just talked about his experience and what had transpired at this company. And I guess the director of diversity decided she would chime in. And so she did chime in and pretty much disputed everything he said, and pretty much said that he was not being truthful. So as a result, he has had 233 comments to what has transpired. So people are commenting on his actual posts, they're commenting on other people's posts, they're commenting on the director of diversity and inclusion, her post. So it's an evolving story. And the reason I'm mentioning it is because I think sometimes we underestimate the power of social media, and we have to be careful about the candidate experience and where that information may end up. So stay tuned. I'll share with you offline the company and the particular. So if you're interested in taking a look or following that candidate, you'll see some of the commentary that has been provided. But I think it's comical just from the standpoint that the recruiter is the person who communicated this information, and the recruiter is the one basically who has kind of caused the problem, so to speak, by just providing this level of feedback. And now it's just kind of mushroomed into a bigger issue.
Wow. You know, I remember, so going back to your statement about the power of social media, I was probably a few months ago, I guess now, the time is just getting past us. There was a employee who posted on LinkedIn, and he said, now that you can't fire me because I'm gay, I'm gay. And, you know, did the why, like, gay, you know, like that. And he got so many, you know, positive, you know, congratulations, you know, this is, you know, wonderful, you know. And when I think about that post, though, I think about as an African American female, I've never said, you know, you can't fire me because I'm Black.
Right.
And we never talk about, you know, are we beneficiaries of affirmative action, right? And, you know, I've been in a meeting, you know, when a Caucasian female, she stood up and she said, yes, I was a beneficiary of a, you know, affirmative action plan, and this is affirmative action with this company, and this is what I've done, you know. So it's kind of interesting, but people do look at your social media, and then we may even talk about some of that in our questions. So thank you. Fred, if you would go next.
Yeah, sure. My name is Fred Thompson. I'm in Chicago also. I've been recruiting for over 20 years, primarily in a manufacturing setting. So I've worked for some companies, Panduit, which is local to Chicago, Pactiv, which is a part of Reynolds, which has a nationwide footprint, but I also started my own company about 2 years ago, Outreach Staffing, and still work primarily in the manufacturing setting. So I think there's a ton of stories, but I think one that's happened most recently, what I'd like to share, is I'm also part of a non-for-profit program called Lumity, which helps students of color, primarily Chicago public school students, get opportunities once they graduate to go into different types of jobs. So about a year ago, I was able to, even though I was no longer at Pactiv, help about 6 youths come from a CBS or CPS high school and go to work for Pactiv at one of their plants. And we had 6 students, 5 males, 1 female, and this was a 12-hour shift in September with the heat, hot, very hard to sustain. All 5 of the guys dropped out in 30 days.
Wow.
The 1 female not only made it past the 30 days, she's still there. She's become a maintenance trainer. She's been promoted 2 times and has really taken it and run with it. I think the point of it is, most of the time we look at a group of people and we try to make a judgment, or within the first day or first conversation with them, we think, well, I know who's going to make it, especially when you like bulk or mass hiring. You think I have a class of people, out of these 10, these 5 are going to make it. She probably would have been the one that would not have been number 1, but here we are a year later and she's been since promoted. So not only is it a learning thing for the company in terms of never judge a book by its cover, but also as an individual, don't limit yourself in terms of what it is that you can and can't do, or what you can do in comparison to the competition. So I think, you know, that's the most recent story of a young lady who took an opportunity and ran with it.
Right. Oh, that's really good. The G.I. Jane.
That's awesome.
Against all odds, especially in that environment. I had a friend of mine who worked in manufacturing, and it was Walmart had contracted with them. And in that area, and you probably know this, that it's hard to find and retain people. It's just so many companies that are looking for the same skill set. And she had the situation where she was literally hiring people who had ankle bracelets on. Mm-hmm. You know, they were, you know, talking about, you know, bringing in, transporting people in from the city or different, you know, places to bring them into the area. So it's great that that G.I. Jane, you know, stuck with it, but it's disappointing that the guys didn't make it out, you know. So hopefully,
well, maybe companies need to start branching out how they think, and there are female applicants out there who could be successful, and not kind of pigeonhole people and expand the recruiting base that they're looking for.
That's a good point. That's a good point. And it kind of leads me into one of the questions that I want to talk to Toy about. And again, Toya and I were together in 2007. We actually worked together. She was a recruiter I was a resource manager, and we attended some African American network that was, that Hewitt had, and so met quite a few people. We had some great, outstanding speakers, to come through and, really try to have some initiatives, that supported Black workers, in the workplace. And a couple of things that I'm seeing, one is it's not, a lot of initiatives now are around development for African Americans. And I'm seeing, companies who are taking stance against racism. One of their goals is to train African Americans. Well, my thing is that I know that African Americans are overqualified many times, right, for jobs that they apply for. They definitely have credentials. They definitely have, the certifications, the degrees, and all of that. And so from your perspective, Toya, I really want to hear what is going to make, a great diversity recruiter, and how is that working, within this space now where everybody's saying that they're a diversity recruiter. So
I agree with you in terms of the stances that a lot of companies are taking. I think at this time, we really need to take a look at what the hiring practices look like. And I say that because you mentioned that they're talking about training African Americans and possibly promoting them within the organization. And that's a good thing. However, the problem I think exists is that we are not really putting solid diversity recruiting practices in place and looking to find talent for marginalized people. And I think that's really where it begins. So we have to look to see what we're missing. We need to take a look at the diversity scorecard to see what we're lacking. And then based on that, that's when you develop your recruiting strategy to determine what you need in the organization, and then also how you're going to develop and build out that strategy on how to actually find that kind of talent. And then when you actually get that kind of talent in, you can see where you've been measured over time and you know that you're making some progress, then look to see how you're going to assimilate that talent into the organization, and then look to see what other areas in the organization they may fit. So it's not just about finding the talent, it's about assimilating that talent into the organization and then determining based on how they perform and their qualifications where they might best fit within the organization. So diversity is a hot topic right now. There are a lot, excuse me, my neighbor's dog had just come over. There are a lot of opportunities within that space. It's just that right now I think our focus must be on actually determining what our hiring practice is going to look like. And that's going to be long-term. And so that might be something that companies at this time, seeing how we're in September, almost October, that they can start looking at their fiscal year next year and determining what that diversity plan is going to look like, and certainly put some processes and some procedures in place in terms of what that's going to look like going into 2021.
Right. So our last session that we did, it was called HR After Dark, and we talked about the state of the Black woman in corporate America. And one of the things we did was we put a slide up to show a diversity bucket, if you will. And many times you'll see where Blacks are grouped in, all the time, right? Blacks are grouped in with all the other affinity groups, right? Including veterans, pregnant women, all of these. And what we talked about in that session is that it's important that companies actually have SMART goals or targets, measurable goals that they're reaching. Because what I understand is that for you as a recruiter, you can't, your hands are tied and trying to push an agenda that the company has not asked you to push. And I recall a Facebook group posting where one of the recruiters they asked her, go out, find candidates for this particular role. If I can recall it correctly, she brought back 6 candidates. They were all African-American candidates, and, you know, submitted that to the hiring manager. And it was at that time, and I believe that she has been with the company for a while, maybe, you know, at least 3 years or so. And so that was the first time that, you know, she was intentional, right? But she brought back the best candidate, and they just happened to be African-American. And when she submitted that, you know, issues were raised as how, you know, what was your process? How did you get, you know, all of these African-Americans who, you know, qualify for this role? So how do you, as a recruiter, justify that, yes, you do have the African-American as the best candidate? Or do you kind of, you know, not necessarily intentionally seek out an African-American, but perhaps ensure that you're getting a diverse pool?
Well, the companies that I have worked for, more importantly, the last organization where I was supporting a major hospitality provider, that was one of their goals, diversity. So it was important to make sure that we did present a diverse slate of candidates to the hiring manager to interview. So that we had to ensure that the recruiters actually were making sure that they were actually developing a sourcing plan that encompassed organizations where they could target those people. So whether it be the organizations or just websites, groups on LinkedIn, they had to actually come up with a sourcing plan to identify diverse candidates and then screen those candidates accordingly and then present the top 3 is what was required by that particular company. I think overall the recruiters did a good job, but it's just something that I think going forward that it should be more of a conscious effort to do. It shouldn't just be because this particular company is interested in a diverse slate of candidates. I think overall, as recruiters, that is our responsibility to make sure that we're getting the best candidates, but at the same time, making sure that there are a diverse slate of candidates. I know I've had some conversations with people when I've asked them about their diversity recruiting strategy. Some people think that when you talk about a diversity recruiting strategy, that you're trying to give preference to a particular group of people. And it's not that, it's just that I want to make sure that I am including that marginalized group of people in the process. And sometimes I feel like they have been overlooked. So sometimes it even, you even have to provide an education to your hiring managers as to why you have come up with this slate of candidates. But if you've had those discussions up front with them and you've communicated to them that you're going to develop a sourcing strategy, and after your intake session, you send them that information in addition to what the sourcing strategy is going to look like, you shouldn't have too many conversations on the back end when you then decide to actually submit candidates for review.
Right. No, that's good stuff. And I think it's going to lead me into the question I have for you, Janice, and that really is around adverse impact. So if you're not consciously trying to find people that are in that marginalized group, then how do you, how can you show that you don't have adverse impact or you don't have unconscious bias?
Right. So I think there are a couple of different things that you can do, and it all starts with just even planning for the interview. So when you're planning for the interview, one of the things that you want to do is know what the actual requirements are for the job, like what is actually required, like what is the skill set you're looking for, what kind of background, what kind of degree, if it requires a degree, if it needs 3 years experience doing this, do they need to know how to use a computer, all of those basic things. And then deciding what questions you're going to ask and stick to those questions. And even with the questions, you want to make sure that the questions are about the role and nothing else. And then when you're asking those particular questions, they need to be asked of all candidates. Not saying that you can't ask for additional information, but if there are 10 questions, ask the 10 questions. Don't go off on a tangent on something else. But one of the things that I found in my recruiting life is that people make decisions on a whole lot of other things. Like I mentioned to you, the young man that we went through this process. They were so busy looking at his hair, they could not make a decision on anything else. And so that's why, as a recruiter talking to candidates, I say to them, you want to eliminate all the distractions. So for him, his hair was a distraction. Not that he wasn't a good candidate, because the feedback wasn't that he wasn't a good candidate. It was that he did not, quote unquote, fit in. So as a candidate, it's important that you eliminate the distractions. And the distractions could be something as simple as, I went to an interview once and I wore so California is very casual. People don't wear suits. They don't wear suits at all. So I go to this interview and I wore what I considered a business dress. I mean, business type dress, but I was still way overdressed in comparison to the people that were actually in the interview, who some of them had on flip-flop shorts and jeans and shorts. And so it was just really interesting, because I looked like I was going to church, to a traditional Baptist church, and they looked like they were going to go play Frisbee on the beach. Right. But again, just even having those types of conversations with the candidates, because if the candidate doesn't ask, then me as a manager or the recruiter say, hey, this is a really casual environment, don't overdress. This is kind of, what's seen as acceptable, but just eliminating all of those, things that may not be important, but what you don't want to do, like I said, with that young man, they spent all of the time focused on the cornrows in his head versus, listening to what he had to say, even though they did say he was a phenomenal candidate for the actual position. The other thing that I would say is that, just the whole stereotypes. And so that also plays into that as well. So you cannot, make decisions on people because of the type of university they went to, where they say they live. If you see on their resume that they live in a predominantly minority, predominantly majority section of, the town or whatever, and not that you don't want to relate to them, but you don't want to base your decisions on that. And so a lot of people, a lot of companies will have things in their repertoire that say, we only recruit from XYZ school. Well, XYZ school might be a school that's $1 million a year. And guess what? You're not going to necessarily find a lot of quote unquote people of color at those particular universities. So again, just making sure that it's fair. And if you do have intention to hiring people of color, you need to go to HSIs or Hispanic Serving Institutions or HBCUs, historically Black colleges and universities, because if you go to a majority school, you might find a minority student there, but most likely you're not going to find the numbers that you would like to do. And they're just making it at all fair. But those are just some basic things that managers especially, or people that are doing recruiting, to make sure that their hiring managers are evaluating the candidate on the resume, the types of experience, the examples that they give, and not off on some other tangent about, I wonder how she got her hair that way, or, what color are her eyes, or, is she mixed, or, you know what I'm saying? Just all the other stuff that doesn't matter. It's really about the skill set. Right.
But so Fred, we're now at the point where we're saying, say it loud, I'm Black and I'm proud, right? I think it's okay to say I'm Black in the workplace. I've never said it before. I've never called it out. I know people, my colleagues, we've talked about some of them earlier, in our pre-conversation, and some of them may not say that. So are we there yet where people can be themselves? Do we have to fit in? What are some of your thoughts?
Well, I don't know if we're completely there yet. Certain companies, and not just companies, certain industries, there is a more comfort level to express Blackness or whatever difference that you have. I think manufacturing, for one, is an industry that is slow to move in that direction. I think that's why it's very important that we have Black representation, not just in HR, but it's very important for us to have Black representation in leadership roles. I think disproportionately, and again, I go to manufacturing a lot because that's what I've been in, that we may make up a significant number of entry-level positions or production positions, but we don't have necessarily that same number of decision makers. To talk about something as simple as, you may have, and Janice made a good point about a certain university that somebody went to, so they may be proud to have gone to Michigan or Ohio State and talk about the football weekend, but we don't have representation of people who went to FAM or who went to Spelman to talk about the different Black universities that are out there. And to that point, I think sometimes we make an assumption that our white counterparts even know that those schools exist. So I think it's incumbent upon us to talk about the diversity in terms of different universities, different programs, Society of Black Engineers, Society of Hispanic Engineers, Women in Engineering. And Toy made a great point about the sourcing strategy. What I found lately, so many companies with their applicant tracking system, they assume they just post a position and it goes to these different outlets, via Zip, Indeed, it can go to a lot of places, but you won't necessarily find diverse candidates because you don't know if your system reaches out to those different universities or different websites. Like there is an HBCU website that I had to find out about a couple of years ago that posts positions, or it gives you the opportunity to go in and you can mine, you know, just like you can search and find resumes and candidates just like you would on LinkedIn or you would on Indeed or anything else. So I think it's incumbent upon us when we have an opportunity to drive the sourcing strategy to actually go to where, to Janice's point, go to where those people are. Actually go to those universities, go to those Hispanic organizations. I mean, even on a grassroots level, even some churches. I mean, you have to physically go. And I think a lot of companies have gotten, I hate to use the word lazy, but they just post a position. I just had this conversation with a client of mine the other day. She said, well, I assume because we pay X amount of money for, I think it's, I won't even name it ATS, but I assume that it's going to all these different places. Well, it's going to those different sites that have paid to be an aggregator or recipient of the aggregation, but that's not necessarily going to be where minority students are at. So I think it's incumbent upon us. But to your original question, I don't think we've gotten there yet. Again, certain industries, probably hospitality, maybe in a hospital setting, we're there. I think manufacturing, IT is highly underrepresented also. So I think it's incumbent upon us to try to do what we can to get decision makers into those positions. And for the company to do it also. I mean, part of it is our job. They have to grow the people too. I mean, we might do our part. They have to grow them. And we're going to have to start promoting people in leadership roles. And then that way, when they see successful Hispanic female, Black male in a leadership role, and not necessarily even to the VP level, even just in the middle management ranks, then they're comfortable to be able to express themselves without any fear of repercussion.
Right. That's good. And one of the things that I thought about too is when Toya and I worked together, she was on the recruiting side, so she's bringing them in, and then I'm on the staffing side, so I'm assigning them to projects. And within the two of us, we can kind of determine, you know, some of the high performers. We can determine some of the people, you know, that are coming into the organization and saying, you know what, if we keep them here and groom them, they can be, you know, the next vice president. And so one of the things that I have noticed is that attracting the best candidate hasn't been an issue for some companies. It's retaining them. It's a glass ceiling that is still there. And I hate to use that term because you guys know that is an old term and it's still relevant. You know, there's not one Black, unless they just named her this week, because I've been doing some other things and haven't been looking at the news, but there's not one Black CEO in the Fortune 500. I'm sorry, Black woman, I think it's 3 Black men. So there's something that's going on, you know, and I remember one of the organizations that I did some consulting with, they had, when you look at their Black numbers, they were in the call center. So they're reporting out, yes, we have, you know, so many Black employees, but yet they're all at the low level in the hourly, you know, within the organization. So let's, I know I just alluded a bit to what's going on with women. And so Toya, you had to have been there and seen that increase, that the transition from, you know, the whole women's movement, if you will, to, you know, that space of we have to bring in and we have to hire, you know, and they put in goals. I know that they put in targets, and I would say many of the companies have reached those targets and exceeded those targets with at least 30 to 40 to 50% female on their leadership team. So do you think that that'll be that same effort that they will make to with as it relates to race and specifically with African American. And I'm not necessarily saying get us to the 30 to 40 to 50% range, but more like, you know, what the census says, right, for us in that area. What are your thoughts around that?
I just think that they're beginning to make a concerted effort to make sure that people who are underrepresented are not going to continue to be underrepresented. And so that's why I mentioned earlier how they are going to really begin to look at the organization as a whole and be a little bit more critical in terms of where do we need people and where should those people come from. So you're really going to take a look at the entire employee population, and you're going to base that on the actual diversity scorecard that you have in place. And that's going to result from some of the employee engagement surveys and also some exit interviews in terms of what's actually transpiring within the organization. So as a result of our current climate and some of the issues that we have encountered more recently around race relations in our country, I do believe that in 2021 there will be an increased surgence of African Americans in various positions in the workplace. So I do think over time, we will see more African Americans and people of color in various roles. But I do think that companies are not just only going to make the statement and not back the statement up. I think they are looking to actually develop those diversity and inclusion initiatives, if they haven't already, into their planning process for next year.
Hey, and I was going
So
to say,
how do we, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say one more thing. One of the other big opportunities I think that all of us have, and this is across every industry, is really in technology. So Fred talked earlier about being involved with some STEM initiatives. And so if you think about the number of people who are either unemployed or underemployed or almost at the point where being laid off, the best thing that they can do for themselves and for their future as even college students is get some technical skills, because those jobs are there. Right now, we're in a situation where we've been bringing over thousands of people from other countries to work in the whole tech space, mostly because we don't have enough United States citizens, people who were born here, who have the technology skill set. And I, too, recruited a lot of people from India and some other in Canada, other countries who had those tech skills. And so while people are out of work or underemployed or whatever, that are, you know, not doing anything right now in COVID, the best thing that they can do is to level up their skills. Why? Because if they don't do it, we'll be sitting here 5 years post-COVID with people still unemployed, still underemployed, when there are a lot of opportunities. And I'm not just saying we as people of color, but we as people in the United States have basically wasted time. So the thing about it is that most people's skills are not going to be needed in 10 years from now. I think there'll always be an HR department, but in reality, a lot of those things, if you think about the way the technology has changed, you know, even the HR space, technically, they don't necessarily need an HR person to manage resumes and do that. We've got all these different applicant tracking systems. They can shoot and, you know, you can cross match, whether it's good or bad, it can still cross match and send you the ideal candidate. Indeed does that right now. You can put in criteria and then get the system to actually send you the types of candidates, the skills that you need based on how the applicant completes the application. And I just think that everybody can level up their skill set by learning something new, because again, the jobs that my parents had, the jobs that your parents had, are not necessarily going to be the jobs in the next 10, 15, 20 years. But I also say people who do have relatively good skills, guess what? We'll be working till we're 90, because there are going to be a lot of jobs for us to do, because there are a lot of people who have not taken it. And what has shocked and surprised me in my work life is the number of people who cannot even turn a computer on and use it, or have basic typing skills, or just, you know, basic things that could, you know, take them to the next level. And it's really, really sad. And I'm trying to understand, I don't even understand how people even live in the United States and they have like no skills when it comes to technology, or, you know, and it's not like there aren't a lot of resources that there are, but I just feel like corporations can do that for even their workforces. You know, you've got a group of people versus laying them off. Let's teach them some new skills so they can go do something else and be prepared to work. Because how much more valuable would you make an employee be if you took a group of people to say, in lieu of layoff, we're going to send you to this training program for the next 6 months. And then, because it'll change their life, you know, to take somebody from an hourly position to now they're doing software development and they're making $80,000, $90,000 a year, while before they were making, you know, minimum wage or something very close to it. But those are just a couple of things that I think that, you know, as people, as us that work in HR, and really just people as a whole, that we have to understand that it's not going to always be like this. And you got to always be evolving and changing and growing and those kind of things. So that was just my 2 cents.
Yeah, no, that's good stuff. And I really appreciate that because, you know, as we think about COVID, you know, I look at it as 2020 vision, right? This is an opportunity that we had to stand still and we watched a lot of things happen, but there's still that opportunity, like you said, to take training, to develop your skills, to realize that some skills are more relevant than others. And to your point, technology is. And one of the roles that I did is writing affirmative action plans. The reason why I got that assignment was because of my Excel skills. Mm-hmm. So there's, when you think about some of the roles in HR, a lot of times we weren't, you know, that technical. We were getting, you know, you had an analyst or somebody that was writing a report for you. You had somebody that's running your payroll. You're having somebody that's, you know, providing, you know, different data. You're not doing your own analysis. Mm-hmm. And companies start to think about, you know, downsizing, what roles are relevant. They are going to be looking at those people who can do it all, unfortunately. Right. So no, that's good stuff. I appreciate that. Really from all of you. So let's, so we've gone through this. We've prepared ourselves. We've now gone through the interview process. You guys have looked through the candidates. You've put the best candidates together. Now it's time to make an offer, right? And I'd like to hear from you, Fred, specifically, if you can talk about just that process. So how, you know, of course, people want the best offer. They want to make sure that they, you know, are not getting low, that they're getting all the perks and all that. But what can, I actually want to hear from all of you. There's, you know, we're from different areas, right? We work from different companies. So I'd really like to hear from all of you concerning this, because this is one of those main questions that we hear in our HR Facebook group. And, you know, it's, you know, I'm nervous about negotiating, or, you know, they made the offer and I think it's low, or it's, you know, so Fred, let me have you go first. How can candidates get the best offer?
So a couple things. One, depending right now on what state you live in, they can no longer ask you what was your last compensation, right? That used to be a way for them to be able to lowball the salary offer, because most companies, rightfully or wrongfully, they had this 10% rule that they wouldn't offer somebody more than 10% of what it is they were making at their last role. So I know in Illinois, we can no longer ask what was your last salary, and you can ask what does the position pay or what is the salary range. Do not be afraid to ask the recruiter or the HR person who you're dealing with, well, before I let you know what I'm looking for, what is the salary range and what does the position pay? Because you are entitled now to legally ask that and get that information back and to leverage that. I do want to go back all the way to the beginning in terms of like when people first get out of school and get their first job. Now, this was before the state law came into place, but I would say as a race, we have a tendency to be scared to negotiate. We have a tendency to not ever push back on what an offer is.
We're so happy we got the job, right?
We're so happy, and especially when you first get out of college, you know, you're so happy to finally find a job. You're used to saying, okay, I'll take it, I got it. Always remember, you will always be behind from a salary standpoint. It may not seem like a big deal, the difference between, let's say, $35,000 and $30,000 when you're 23 years old. But just like anything else with interest, if you continue to just get a 3% merit increase and that other person took $5,000 more coming off, that gap becomes wider and wider.
Especially
so
with the bonus.
with bonuses and just even with cost of living increases, right? If you start off at $5,000 behind, in 10 years from now, we both get a 3% increase, that $5,000 can become almost $20,000. So let's take that scenario, and then we both done it. 10 years from now, we both go back out and try to find another job. I'm negotiating at $75,000, or you're negotiating at $60,000, right? So some of this is just culturally. I think we have to be from the outset, once we get out of school or whatever the salary negotiations want to be for our first job, push back. If a company, and I can't remember if I've ever seen it, if a company rescinds an offer because you push back over a few $1,000s, you probably don't want to work there anyway. I know it's hard to say that when you're first looking for a job. Always push back on the initial offer. They are not.
You're going to have family. You're going to have people say, you got that good job. You got that good job. You got that.
Salary positions, all salary positions have a salary range. All right. It is not a hard and fast number. For the right person, typically once you advance in your career, they can go over that range. Right. So I just want to make sure that everybody understands that. If they come at you with 80,000, 80,000 was probably a midpoint number within a range, or a 3/8 number where they don't have to get additional approval. Always push back on that, on the initial offer. All right. That's my advice. But even more importantly, and I'm passionate about this going back, your first offer, salary offer that you get, do not be afraid to push back, because that may possibly set your salary negotiation platform for years. And that number, that gap will increase. You're always chasing behind something. I'll just be brutally honest with you. Our white counterparts, especially white males, they always push back. It is very rare that I close out one of our white counterparts, especially white males, with the initial offer. They will negotiate either over the salary, vacation, the bonus, profit sharing. They feel like they have to negotiate in order to feel like they've actually done their job. We have to start taking that same mentality and pushing back.
No, that's actually a good point. And I want to pause there. So culturally, we tend to be excited that we got the offer. We've gone through the struggle, if you will, to even get there through the series of interviews and all of that. And so we feel like, you know, they're going to give us, we assume that they're going to give us the best offer and it's going to be fair. Mm-hmm. But what you're saying is that other cultures are taught to always negotiate. Mm-hmm. I was taught to negotiate, and it's basically because of the type of work that I do that I have to show. So this is me thinking, you know, I have to show them that I know how to negotiate. Mm-hmm. I would say one of the best negotiations that I saw, and I'd like for you guys to talk about if you can think of something that, you know, a great, because I want to give people tangible examples. So kind of think about one of your best negotiations where you were like, wow, okay, here we go. It was a white male, and basically instead of doing it verbally, right, on the phone with the HR, with the recruiter, he sent an email to the hiring manager and laid out the terms. What he did was he took the base salary and calculated it into an hourly rate and then rounded up the hourly rate. So in this case, I think it was, I don't know, he was making like $275, you know, so he was, you know, a VP in the organization, but he rounded it up to give himself another $5, you know, to stick another $6,000 in on, you know, with the offer. But he also said, and this was the one that stuck with me the most, he negotiated that he would get his bonus quarterly. So the rest of us, we wait until the end of the year, we go through that performance process, and then January, February, March, depending on the company, that's when you get your bonus payout. He negotiated to get that quarterly. Mm-hmm. I was like, there you go. I like this. That was one of the things that impressed me. I mean, he had a whole list of things, but that was one that impressed me the most. I'd like to hear from Fred. Do you have an actual situation where you thought this was a good negotiation? The way they said it, how they did it.
Mm-hmm.
Practical advice, please.
Well, I mean, I've had people, and this is probably more at higher levels, people who have been able to calculate how much they're going to save a company, right? In terms of if they're an engineer, and again, I do a lot with manufacturing. So let's say they're a lean manager or a lean improvement engineer. They can calculate what they've saved their previous company and what they're asking them to come in and save, and how much money they're going to save to leverage that to negotiate a higher salary coming in. So if I want to save you 1.5 million and you're giving me $120,000, I want to make sure that you understand that we're not able to close this cause at 130. So I think, and I was surprised that some hiring managers and companies say, you know what, at the end of the day, he or she is going to save us X amount of money, $1.2 million. Why are we stuck on $10,000 to $15,000?
Right.
So when you're able to articulate what you're able to save and bring that back to close this gap, so we're willing to lose this person over a small percentage of what they can mean effectively, that's great. I do want to go back to one thing you said about bonus. Another thing that people should do is when you are interviewing for a bonus eligible position, find out when the bonus is paid out. So for example, if you're getting hired in say October, the bonus pays out in December, you aren't eligible, or you only want to get a prorated bonus, which means you need to negotiate your own salary to represent the fact that it's going to take you over a year to even get a bonus.
That's a good point.
To offset that, there should be some consideration of the incoming salary now, in lieu of the fact that you may be 14 months away from actually getting 100% of a bonus. And we all know, as much as we love bonuses, that's not even a guaranteed number. So the fact that I may be waiting 14 months to get a number that may not hit, especially given COVID and other natural causes, leverage the fact that you're not going to get it 100% into the initial salary up front.
Right. No, that's good stuff. Do either one of you have anything to add?
Yeah, I'd like to actually chime in. I think oftentimes we don't understand our value and what we're worth in comparison to our counterparts. And I think that's very important. So I know you had asked for specifics in terms of an example of somebody and when they negotiated an increase based on the salary that they were offered. So I actually had a friend that I had to coach and counsel because she had received a really good offer, and then she was somewhat disappointed with the offer. And so when she was talking to me about it, she wanted to find out how she could go about negotiating the offer. She said, I don't want to decline it. She said, I like the job, and I'm sure that the responsibilities are just, exactly what I'm looking for, but I'm somewhat disappointed with it. And I told her to put together an email. I said, send it to the person who extended the offer to you, and mention to them your accomplishments and what you've done in your current position and how you can add value to your prospective employer, because this is what you can do. And she did put that information together. She did end up having a conversation with the actual recruiter and then the person who eventually hired her, but they did increase the base of her offer. And so she ended up getting exactly what she wanted. But I think she just needed to think a little bit more strategically around her own values and what she can add. And I think the employer that she went to understood what she could bring to the position. And she's in financial services, and she currently is a VP. And I'm just really looking at the level of the position in which she actually accepted. And then there are very few women in that space, and especially African-American women. So I think overall, it was a win-win for everyone, the company as well as a friend of mine.
Yeah, and I was going to say, it's not just the salary and the bonus, it's everything, the total rewards, because I know at least in California, one of the things that I struggled with from leaving one company and going to the next was how much time I was going to spend commuting. Mm-hmm. So if I'm going to spend 2 to 3 hours each way every day going back and forth to work, how much this worth, in terms of wear and tear on my car, mm-hmm. the tolls and all of that. And so one of the things that I realized, I was paying like $1,500 to $1,800 a month just the driving back and forth. So I knew that if I took another role that was going to be closer to where I lived, that I didn't have all of that commuting. And then guess what? The role that I took, I get to work from home 3 of the 5 days a week. So I'm already saving money, and I don't have to go as far. And then from a bonus perspective, especially because you don't really know how the company is going to end up at the end of the year, especially with everything we've had with COVID. And so this particular role that I ended up taking, we bonus every month. So I haven't even been there just over a month, and I've already gotten my first bonus. So all in all, the savings that I got from the crazy commute and the fact that I've already gotten a bonus, and I've only been there for, like I said, a little over 30 days, and I'm on target to get a similar bonus for the rest of the year, I'm happy. But what it looked like from the beginning was that the base salary was less, but because I know that I'm getting that guaranteed bonus on a monthly basis, because that's how they work, and I'm going to get it, there's nothing that's stopping me from getting that bonus. It ended up being more money, if that makes sense. And then
right.
the super expensive benefits that I was paying for before. So I probably saved about $2,500 a month from working from home, not having to, do that expense. The fact that I'm getting my bonus on a monthly basis and not having to pay the crazy amount for benefits, it's actually saving money. I have more money in my bank than I have, even though at the outset it looked like, oh, you're taking a significant decrease. But in reality, the net effect to my pocketbook was not a decrease. But just looking at all of those different things, and the other fact was, I'm able to contribute to my 401k 30 days in. So I'm already doing a lot better than I was in my last role, because I was able to put, money aside up front. So just all of those different things. And so I think it's just really looking at the total, the total package. They call all of that total rewards, just everything all inclusive. And so don't get so hung up on the quote unquote, the salary is this, but there are a whole lot of other pieces that, and then
exactly.
And the other part is that I've relocated a few times with a bunch of different companies. I moved everywhere from East Coast to West Coast to the Midwest, etc. And then one of the things I know is that when I've relocated, the 6 times that I relocated, that also throws you in another income bracket, because that becomes income to you. And so that is another thing that you have to look. If you're going to relocate, they have to make it worth your while, because if it's not worth your while, all it does is mess you up from a tax standpoint. So it's just, all of those different things that are involved in terms of, looking at salary.
Yeah. No, thank you for that. Now, I told you guys when we started that this hour was going to go fast.
Yes.
And we are almost, we're almost at the top of the hour, but I want to give Toya a chance to give us some of her websites that diverse applicants can go to, or some of the key places or, opportunities, so that they can be found by recruiters who are looking.
I think it depends really on what you're looking for, but there are a number of websites. So there's diversityjobs.com, allhispanicjobs.com, asianhires.com, women in technology, veterans hiring. There's also NSBE, some of the organizations that actually post their positions on their site, BDPA, ASE. So those are just some of the organizations and actual job sites that you can go to find top candidates. Obviously, there are many, many more that I haven't mentioned, but those are a few that you can actually find top quality candidates.
Okay. So I want to give you guys a chance to do some final thoughts. Before you do that, I want to remind our guests that we have our next session Wednesday. It's going to be the SHRM Black Chapter Presidents again. So they'll come and follow up. But then let's hear from everybody. Fred, if you go first, please.
I mean, everything we covered today is pertinent. There's some things that I'm sure we could expound on, but out of anything that we talked about today, Janice made an excellent point about the lack of participation in STEM. I'm doing a search right now for a company to try to find engineers, and it's not just African Americans. As Americans, we're not majoring in technology. So in some technology positions don't even require a 4-year degree. It's a certification. So more emphasis on that. If traditional college is not the route you want to go, there's ways to circumvent that to make yourself much more attractive as a prospective employee.
Thank you. Janice?
And I was going to say the same thing, boot camps. Those 6-month, 3-month boot camps, You can do it at your house, online. You can do a Zoom type platform class, have projects. Most of them are free, especially for people of color, for women of color, because there is a lack of people that want to go into technology. And having recruited a lot of people in tech over my career, and me coming as an engineer who switched to HR, man, if I had had a mentor those days, I probably would have stayed in tech.
Yeah. Thank you. And Toya, please.
Yes, I'd like to comment on what Janice mentioned in terms of really looking at the organization as a whole and what they have to offer, and not always focusing on the monetary piece of it, because there are other factors that go into the equation too when you're considering an opportunity. And I know right now with COVID, the majority of people are working from home, but normally the issue is work-life balance. And so sometimes you don't have that, just depending on the nature of your position. So that's something important to consider as well. So I would just say, look at the total package and make sure that you're making the best decision as it pertains to your career and for the benefit of your family and your mental state as well.
Right.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for joining us again. Be sure to like our Facebook page, HR for All People, and hopefully you can find some time in your schedule to join us for next week. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.